The streets of Accra were alive with noise, yet she felt utterly invisible. A young mother, her clothes tattered and hair tangled, sat against the cold, cracked pavement, cradling her two tiny children who trembled from hunger and fear. Their eyes, wide and weary, searched for a miracle that never came. Abandoned by the one she once trusted, rejected by family she had learned to survive on scraps and fleeting kindness. And just as despair tightened its grip around her heart, a figure emerged from the crowd, a man from her past. Someone she had long forgotten yet could never truly erase. Was this fate stepping in? Or another test she was not ready for? One glance and her world could change forever. Comment below, tell us your country and your local time, and don't forget to subscribe for the full story. The morning sun had barely climbed over the skyline of Accra. Yet the streets were already alive with the usual chaos, the cacophony of horns, the shouting of vendors, and the shuffling of people rushing to work. Cars crawled slowly along the congested roads, weaving in and out, dodging potholes and unpredictable crossings. Among them, a sleek black SUV glided with a quiet authority, its tinted windows reflecting the harsh sunlight. Inside, a man named Kofi leaned back in his seat, scrolling absently through his phone. Despite the luxury surrounding him, his mind felt strangely restless. As the car approached a busy junction, it dipped into a deep pothole, jolting slightly. The driver, accustomed to the city's rough edges, adjusted carefully, slowing down to navigate around the damaged asphalt. Kofi's eyes drifted outside the window as if sensing something unusual. And then he saw her. She was sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, back against a thin, weary tree. Her hair was tangled and streaked with dust, her worn-out dress clung awkwardly to her body, and her small frame trembled slightly as she pulled her two children closer. The boys were no more than 4 years old, and yet the weight of life already etched itself on their faces. One pressed a fist to his mouth, trying to hold back a sob, while the other stared blankly ahead, his small eyes reflecting both exhaustion and fear. Kofi's chest tightened. There was something about her, the shape of her shoulders, the curve of her jaw, that tugged at a memory he thought he had long buried. His pulse quickened, an uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. Could it really be her? No, that was impossible. Yet the deeper he looked, the clearer it became. The woman before him was Amara, the girl who had once walked confidently through school corridors, who had laughed brightly without a hint of worry, and who had somehow always seemed out of reach. He blinked, forcing himself to study the scene carefully. The boys clung to her, their tiny hands gripping her arms as if she were the only thing keeping them from vanishing into the harsh world. The sight struck Kofi with a strange mixture of sorrow and disbelief. How had life led her to this moment, to sitting on a dirty street corner in the cold light of morning, looking broken yet fiercely protective of her children? "Pull over," he whispered to the driver, his voice tight with a mix of urgency and uncertainty. The vehicle obeyed, easing to a stop a short distance away. Kofi didn't wait for the engine to idle completely. He opened the door and stepped out, polished shoes clicking softly against the uneven pavement. Every step toward her felt heavy, each movement measured with a mixture of anticipation and dread. When he was only a few feet away, he hesitated, studying her face up close. The years had changed her. There was a weariness in her eyes that had never been there before, a weight she carried that made her seem smaller, fragile even. Yet beneath it all, Kofi could still recognize the spark, the essence of the girl he had once known. He took a slow breath and spoke her name. Amara. Her head snapped up, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink around them. Recognition and shock flickered across her face, quickly replaced by guarded fear. "Kofi," she whispered, voice trembling, weak from exhaustion and disbelief. The children clung tighter, sensing the tension, their small bodies shaking. Kofi felt a swell of emotion, shock, guilt, anger at the unfairness of it all, and an overwhelming desire to protect her. "It's me," he said softly, almost pleading. He wanted her to understand that he meant no harm, only concern. For a few seconds, the city noise faded into the background, leaving only the sound of distant engines and the soft, irregular breathing of her children. Amara's lips parted slightly, but no words came. Her eyes, once bright with the confidence of youth, were now dull and heavy with pain. The vibrant girl he had admired from afar was gone, replaced by a woman hardened by circumstances he could scarcely imagine. What happened to you?" Kofi asked gently, though his voice betrayed his rising frustration and sorrow. Amara swallowed hard, tightening her hold on the boys. "Leave Kofi. Just go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But he couldn't. Not after seeing her like this, not after remembering the girl who had once lit up every room she entered. Something inside him refused to walk away. The younger boy whimpered, pressing his tiny face into his mother's side, his stomach clearly empty. Kofi's heart sank. He bent slightly, bringing himself closer to their level. "Look at them," he urged, softly pointing to the children. "They're hungry. They need a safe place. You don't have to do this alone, Amara." Her lips quivered and her grip tightened around the boys. "You don't understand. You can't fix this. Some things are too broken to fix," she said, her voice a mixture of shame, fear, and defiance. Kofi straightened, steadying his breathing. "Maybe not everything," he said gently, "but you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore." Amara turned away, shaking slightly as if to hide her trembling. I can manage. I don't need your pity," she said quickly, almost as if saying it out loud could make it true. "This isn't pity," Kofi replied firmly, his voice calm but unyielding. "This is me trying to help someone I know, someone I care about." Her eyes darted toward him, flickering with a mixture of fear and hope. "If I go with you, what happens next? I can't depend on anyone." Life has taught me that, she admitted, the words spilling out in a quiet rush. Kofi's gaze softened, full of understanding. "Life has been unkind to you, but you don't have to fight it alone anymore," he said. He motioned gently toward the children. "Let's at least give them a chance. Just tonight. Let them eat, rest. Feel safe." Amara hesitated. Her breathing was uneven. Her children were weak and exhausted, too tired to protest. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "All right. Just for tonight," she whispered. Relief washed over Kofi as he extended a hand to help her up. The boys clung to her, glancing at him with cautious curiosity. As they walked toward the SUV, the city's chaos seemed to fade into a background hum, replaced by the fragile but growing sense of hope. Inside the car, the warmth contrasted sharply with the chill of the streets. Amara pressed her children, close eyes fixed on the window as the world passed by, almost afraid that this moment of safety might vanish. Kofi remained quiet, giving her space while carefully ensuring that they were comfortable. A silent promise forming in his heart: he would not leave them, not now. Not ever. The journey had only just begun, but the first seeds of change, of second chances, were already taking root. The sun climbed higher over Accra, its warm rays doing little to soften the chill in the air around the busy street corner. Amara pressed her children closer to her chest, their small bodies shivering from hunger, exhaustion, and the lingering fear that the world had already abandoned them. She had survived months like this, days blurred into nights and nights into endless worry, but today felt different. Today, someone from her past had appeared, a face she could never forget, stirring memories she had long tried to bury. Kofi stood only a few feet away, his eyes locked on hers. The polished shoes he wore contrasted sharply with the dirt-streaked sandals that clung to her feet. He wanted to reach out to say more than just her name, but the weight of her suffering hung between them, thick and heavy. He noticed the way her hands shook slightly as she clutched her children, the way her eyes darted nervously to the street around them, as though expecting trouble at any moment. Amara, Kofi said again, his voice softer this time, but carrying the same authority it always had. His gaze softened as he tried to communicate through mere presence that he meant no harm. It's really me. Please, can we talk? Her eyes widened, a flash of recognition mixed with fear, disbelief, and defensiveness. She shook her head quickly, backing a step away. You don't understand. You can't. Don't, she whispered, almost inaudible, as if speaking too loudly would shatter some fragile shield she had built around herself. The younger boy whimpered, pressing his small hand against his stomach. Kofi noticed instantly the unmistakable sound of hunger, raw and urgent. The other child buried his face against her shoulder, small shoulders trembling. Seeing them like this twisted something deep in Kofi's chest. He had never imagined seeing Amara in such a state, holding on desperately to her children, her own hope almost completely drained. Look at them, Amara, he said gently, crouching slightly to meet their eye level. They're hungry. They need safety. A place where they won't have to fight to survive every day. Amara's lips trembled as she shook her head. You can't fix this. You can't. Some things are too broken, she said, voice cracking. Her pride, her long-held self-reliance clashed violently with the instinct to accept help. Kofi straightened, taking a slow, calming breath. Maybe not everything, he said carefully, but they don't have to do it alone. Not tonight. Not anymore. She looked at him, incredulous. The years had changed her in ways even she didn't fully recognize. The girl who had once been confident, whose laughter had lit up hallways, had been replaced by a woman worn down by betrayal, rejection, and struggle. And yet, beneath the exhaustion and the grime, Kofi could see the faint spark of that old Amara, the woman he had once admired silently from afar. They left us. Everything. My children, me. Everything, she whispered, glancing at her sons. Her voice carried a brittle, haunted edge. You don't know what it's like. I've survived on scraps, on kindness that was never consistent. You just can't fix it. Kofi's chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to shake her, to make her understand that she deserved more than mere survival. But instead he knelt slightly, his hands open, palms visible in a gesture of peace. Amara, I'm not here to fix the past. I can't change what's been done, but we can start now. Let them eat. Let them sleep somewhere safe tonight. Let them feel human again. She turned sharply away, clutching the children tighter. I don't need your pity. I've managed this far without anyone. She muttered, a mixture of defiance and fear threading through her words. Kofi shook his head slowly. This isn't pity, he said, his voice firm but calm. This is care. This is a chance to stop fighting alone, even if just for a night. You don't have to face everything yourself. For a moment, silence fell over them. The city continued its relentless march around them, cars honking, vendors shouting, people hurrying past. But for Amara and Kofi, the world had narrowed to that small patch of sidewalk, to her children clinging to her, to the fragile thread of hope that had unexpectedly appeared. Amara's eyes flickered with conflicting emotions. Pride, fear, exhaustion, and a hesitant glimmer of trust she had not allowed herself in years. If I go with you, no, what then? She asked softly, her voice almost breaking. I can't rely on anyone anymore. Life has taught me that. Kofi's gaze softened. Life has been unkind to you. Yes, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Let me help just for tonight. Let's get them fed. Let's get them somewhere safe. He nodded toward the children, whose eyes were wide, uncertain, yet filled with a faint hope they didn't know how to name. Her lips parted, the words trapped in her throat. She looked down at the boys, noticing for the first time how small and vulnerable they truly were. Their eyes pleaded silently, their bodies leaning toward her with trust and dependence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. All right. Just for tonight, she whispered, voice barely audible. Relief washed over Kofi as he extended a hand to her, careful, respectful. She hesitated only a moment before letting him help her to her feet. The boys pressed even closer, clutching at her skirt and arms. As they walked toward the SUV, Kofi kept his distance, allowing her the space to adjust, but never letting go of the quiet promise he was making with every step he would not abandon them, not now, not ever. Inside the car, the contrast between the warmth of the vehicle and the cold, harsh streets was striking. The boys pressed against their mother, curious and wary, while Amara kept her gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. It all felt surreal, the bustling city she had navigated with such caution now blurred past the tinted windows. And yet she could not shake the feeling that this moment might vanish like a dream slipping through her fingers. Kofi remained quiet, giving her space yet keeping watch. He thought of the months she must have spent surviving alone, the nights lying awake with worry gnawing at her, the days scraping by with insufficient food. Every detail of her exhaustion, of the strain etched into her face, tugged at his conscience, and at something deeper. Something he had always felt for her, though unspoken, and now crystal clear in the urgency of this moment. The children shifted, finding a small comfort in the enclosed space, their fear slowly melting into curiosity as they observed the interior of the car. For the first time in months, they felt the faintest spark of safety, a sensation Amara had nearly forgotten existed. Kofi glanced at her again. The girl he had once admired was still there somewhere, beneath the weight of survival, beneath the dirt and the fear. And he knew with a certainty that surprised even him that she deserved more than mere existence. She deserved hope. She deserved a chance. The journey ahead would not be simple, and neither of them could know what the next hours or days would bring. But in that moment, a small shift occurred, a fragile opening in the armor Amara had built around herself. And with it came the faintest, most delicate spark of possibility. A chance for something better, for a life not dictated by hunger, fear, or abandonment. As the SUV moved through the crowded streets carrying Amara and her children toward a place of warmth and safety, Kofi allowed himself a small, quiet hope. Perhaps this time the second chance was real. Perhaps this time the world would not leave her alone. The SUV rolled steadily through the crowded streets of Accra, leaving behind the chaos of honking cars, shouting vendors, and the relentless pulse of the city. Inside, Amara sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the window, the sunlight casting streaks across her worn face. Her children, small and fragile, clung to her arms as if their very survival depended on her strength. For months, life had been a constant struggle, days blurred into nights and nights into restless waiting, scavenging, and endless worry. But now, with Kofi beside her, something inside her stirred an unease she couldn't fully understand. Kofi stole glances at her from time to time, his gaze lingering on the subtle changes the years had brought. The confident, vibrant girl he had known seemed like a distant memory. Back in their school days, Amara had walked through the halls with her head held high, laughter spilling easily, drawing attention without effort. Friends surrounded her, admirers lingered in the background, and she had carried herself with an ease that made her appear untouchable. Kofi had watched her from afar, silently wishing for a moment that might never come. She had never seen him the way he saw her then, not really. To her, he had been just another boy in the background, a quiet presence among the crowded corridors of adolescence. Now sitting beside him in a car that smelled of polished leather and faint cologne, Amara felt almost invisible. The years of struggle had left their mark, her hair tangled, clothes worn, eyes heavy with exhaustion, and shoulders bowed under the weight of responsibility. She had been forced to become both mother and provider, to fight for every meal, every moment of safety, every scrap of hope. The girl who had once moved through life with effortless confidence had been replaced by a woman tempered by hardship, her spirit both resilient and wary. As the car navigated a particularly rough stretch of road, Kofi broke the silence, his voice soft but deliberate. Do you remember the science fair? He asked gently, a hint of nostalgia threading his words. Amara's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, but she didn't meet his gaze. Memories rose unbidden, the crowded gymnasium filled with students, the smell of glue and paint, the excitement of showcasing their projects. She remembered how she had won first place for her experiment on renewable energy, how she had felt a surge of pride as everyone clapped, and she remembered him standing there timid and awkward, offering a shy smile that she had barely noticed. Yes, she whispered finally, her voice low, almost drowned out by the hum of the engine. I remember. Kofi smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes crinkling with the memory. You were amazing. Everyone loved you. I admired you from the sidelines. Amara's gaze dropped to her hands, worn and calloused from work, the nails chipped and dirt-streaked. She swallowed hard, trying to push back the flood of emotion. You didn't notice me, she said, her tone tinged with both wistfulness and bitterness. Not really. I don't know. Invisible to you, I did notice, Kofi admitted quietly. I just never had the courage to say anything. You seemed so far above me, so untouchable. And I didn't want to ruin the memory of you being happy. She shook her head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Happiness, she murmured almost to herself. That was a lifetime ago. Look at me now. Look at my children. Look at what life has done. Her voice wavered, carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every moment of fear. I fought tooth and nail just to keep them alive. And for what? For this. Kofi reached over, resting a hand lightly on hers. Not touching, just hovering close enough to offer silent reassurance. For this, he said softly, is exactly why I'm here. Not to fix everything, not to erase the past, but to make sure that from this moment on you don't have to fight alone anymore. Her eyes flicked up to his, searching for sincerity, for a hint of pity, for anything that might betray ulterior motives. There was none. Only care, only a quiet, unyielding resolve to help. It was almost too much to accept after so many years of self-reliance and survival against all odds. Why now, she asked, voice trembling. Why show up after all this time? Why me? Because I couldn't ignore it, he said simply. Seeing you there. Seeing them. He gestured toward the children who were leaning against her, eyes wide, small hands clutching at her dress. I couldn't walk away. Not when someone I know is suffering like this. Not when they need a chance to be safe, to be fed, to feel human again. Amara looked down, biting her lip to stop herself from crying. The raw honesty, the lack of judgment, the quiet insistence on offering help without strings attached, it was almost unbearable. She had long believed that the world owed her nothing, that every favor came at a price. And yet here was someone willing to step in to offer care without expectation, to stand by her in the harsh light of reality. Her mind drifted again to the past, to the boy she had loved. Once the man who had promised her the world and left her with nothing. She remembered the moment she had discovered she was pregnant, the fear and anticipation, the hope that he would stay. And then the crushing emptiness as he vanished from her life entirely. The betrayal, the isolation, the relentless struggle it had shaped her, hardened her. And yet here was Kofi offering a different kind of possibility. Protection, stability, and perhaps trust. The SUV slowed at a red light, the city buzzing around them. Amara's thoughts were a storm of past pain and present uncertainty. She glanced at Kofi, studying the lines of his face, the steady calm in his eyes, and she felt something unfamiliar, a cautious glimmer of hope. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself, after everything, to believe in kindness again? The children stirred, shifting against her tiny hands, reaching out for reassurance. She looked at them and took a deep, shaky breath. The years of independence, the long nights of fear, the endless labor, it had all led to this fragile, uncertain moment. Perhaps she thought this was a chance she had not expected but could not ignore. Perhaps this was the beginning of something she had been too afraid to hope for. Kofi's voice broke her reverie. "We're almost there," he said quietly, a subtle reassurance in every syllable. "A safe place, a warm meal, a bed for tonight. That's all I'm asking." Her lips trembled, and for the first time in a long while she allowed herself to believe it might be true. Slowly she nodded, her children pressing closer. "All right," she whispered almost inaudibly. Just for tonight." Relief flooded Kofi's chest. He had seen the pain, the resilience, the exhaustion, and now the first small opening of trust. He reached out gently to guide her to the SUV, careful to respect her space, careful to offer support without intrusion. The children's eyes widened at the sight of the vehicle, the possibilities it represented, and they tentatively stepped forward, trusting their mother's judgment. As they settled into the car, the sounds of the city faded behind them, replaced by a fragile, tentative silence. Each of them, in their own way, sensed that the course of their lives was about to change, that the first step toward hope had been taken. And though the journey ahead remained uncertain, the seeds of possibility had been sown, quiet, delicate, and full of promise. The SUV had finally eased into the quieter streets, away from the chaos of Accra, where the morning hustle was replaced by the muted hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. The air inside the vehicle was thick with unspoken tension. Amara clutched her children close, their small bodies pressed against her arms, and for a moment she could only breathe shallowly, caught between fear and the unfamiliar hope stirring in her chest. Kofi glanced at her quietly, searching for the right words, knowing that a single misstep could send her retreating into the protective shell she had spent months crafting. "Amara," he began gently, his voice steady, "I want to understand. Tell me, how did things come to this?" She shook her head, eyes darting to her sons. "You can't understand," she said, the words sharp, almost defensive. "Nobody can. Life has been cruel, and I've learned to survive on my own." Kofi exhaled slowly. "I don't claim to know everything you've endured," he said softly, "but I do know enough to see that what's happening to you and your children is not right. You don't deserve this." Her gaze fell to the floor, and for a long moment silence hung between them. The children fidgeted, their tiny hands clutching her skirts, sensing the tension radiating from both adults. Finally she spoke, voice low and quivering. "I've fought for every meal, every scrap of safety out every single day. And what has it gotten me? 2 hungry children and no one to lean on. You don't understand." Kofi leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto hers. "Then help me understand," he said calmly. "Let me in just a little. Not to fix the past, but to make sure you and your children don't have to fight alone anymore." Her lips trembled. "And what if I fail you, or worse? What if you leave too? People always leave. Life has taught me to trust no one." Kofi's jaw tightened, not in anger but in frustration at the injustice she had endured. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I'm not like the others. I'm here for them, for you, for this moment, and every moment we can give them safety. You don't have to do it alone anymore, Amara." She glanced at him, disbelief etched on her face. You're so sure," she whispered almost bitterly. "You think you can just step into my life and change everything with a few words? You don't know what it's like to be abandoned, to be hungry, to be mocked and forgotten. You can't just fix it." Kofi exhaled, steadying himself, and let his eyes soften. "Maybe not everything can be fixed," he admitted. "But we can start somewhere. Just tonight. Let them eat. Let them sleep somewhere safe. Let them feel human." "Is that too much?" Amara's body shook slightly. The children clung tighter, instinctively sensing the gravity of the conversation. "You don't understand." She whispered again, her pride and fear warring with the spark of hope that Kofi's words ignited. Some things are too broken. I can't just let anyone in. You don't have to let anyone in all at once, Kofi replied, his tone gentle but unwavering. Not all at once. Just enough to keep your children safe, to give them a meal and a warm bed. That's all I'm asking. Nothing more. The tension was palpable, stretching across the small space of the vehicle. Amara's gaze softened for a fraction of a second as she looked at her sons, their hungry eyes, their tired faces. She remembered the nights spent scavenging for food, the long walks searching for work that didn't exist, the endless struggle just to keep them alive. And in that moment, something inside her cracked a fragile acknowledgement that perhaps she didn't have to bear it all alone. She began, but her voice faltered. She pressed her lips together, the weight of her pride and years of survival threatening to undo her resolve. I can't trust like that anymore. I've tried, I've learned the hard way. People leave. Kofi's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. And I know that, but trust doesn't have to be all or nothing. Not yet. Just enough to let me help them tonight. Let me help you protect them. A small, almost imperceptible nod followed. Her hands, rough from hard work and worry, trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on the children. Just for tonight, she whispered. Relief flickered across Kofi's face. That's all I ask, he said quietly. He reached out, offering a gentle hand toward her, not touching, only inviting. She hesitated, studying him, her mind racing with doubt, fear, and the faintest glimmer of hope. Slowly, cautiously, she took it. The children pressed even closer to her, sensing the shift in the air, their tiny bodies relaxing slightly. As they approached the SUV, Kofi maintained a careful distance, ensuring that his presence was reassuring rather than imposing. The city noise faded into a dull hum as they moved away from the crowded streets. For the first time in months, Amara allowed herself to imagine the possibility of safety, warmth, and even care, a concept so alien it almost frightened her. Inside the car, the children's eyes widened at the unfamiliar interior, the smell of leather, the quiet comfort. They whispered to one another, fingers brushing over the seats, their trust in their mother unspoken but absolute. Amara adjusted them in her arms, still tense, still wary, but feeling a small flicker of relief she hadn't felt in years. Kofi remained quiet, letting her process, letting the children feel a sense of normalcy for the first time in too long. He studied her from the corner of his eye, the way her fingers trembled, the tight line of her jaw, the faint crease of worry on her forehead, and he felt a surge of determination. He would not let her face this alone, not tonight. Not ever. Amara's thoughts drifted back to her past once more, the boy who had promised her love and left her with nothing, the nights of isolation, the endless struggle to survive. The bitterness that had hardened her heart softened slightly as she considered the present, a man standing patiently beside her, offering safety without judgment, stability without strings. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that perhaps someone could see her pain, her resilience, her humanity, and choose to care anyway. The car moved steadily, carrying them away from the streets where they had struggled for so long, toward an uncertain future that nonetheless shimmered with possibility. Amara looked at her sons, their small faces still wary but softened by curiosity, and felt the faintest stirrings of trust, fragile but undeniable. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, help could arrive without cost, that kindness could exist without betrayal. And as Kofi drove on, the city receding behind them, a quiet promise hung in the air, one of protection, care, and the possibility that for tonight at least they might know safety, warmth, and a glimmer of hope. The SUV wound through the quieter streets of Accra, leaving behind the jarring chaos of honking horns and shouting vendors. Inside, Amara sat stiffly, her children clinging tightly to her, their small bodies shaking from fatigue and the lingering pangs of hunger. Every so often the younger boy let out a soft, pitiful cry, pressing a tiny fist against his stomach while the older sibling buried his face against Amara's shoulder, trembling his small frame, betraying the months of struggle they had endured. For months Amara had been the unyielding protector, fending off hunger, exhaustion, and the harshness of a world that seemed to have forgotten her. Every day had been a battle, scraping for food, searching for work that barely existed, and keeping her children alive through sheer grit and determination. And yet as Kofi glanced at them from the corner of his eye, he saw the telltale signs that even the strongest could crack. The children's vulnerability was a mirror to their mother's own exhaustion, an undeniable reminder of how much she had carried alone. Kofi's voice, gentle but insistent, broke the silence. "Amara," he said, "look at them. They need food. They need a warm place to rest. And you don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Amara's lips quivered. She wanted to argue, to insist that she could manage, that she didn't need anyone's help. Pride had been her armor for so long. But as she glanced down at her sons, the raw reality of their small, weary faces struck her heart with renewed force. The younger boy whimpered again, his tiny frame, shivering eyes full of unspoken desperation. The older boy peeked at Kofi nervously, uncertain of what this man meant for their lives. A fragile mixture of fear, hope, and exhaustion collided within Amara. Her throat tightened and she swallowed hard, struggling to maintain control. I can manage," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I've survived this long. I've kept them alive. I don't need anyone." Kofi leaned slightly forward, his gaze unwavering but full of compassion. "Amara, I'm not here to take over your life. I'm not here to judge or make decisions for you. I'm here to make sure you and your children don't have to face this night alone. Just tonight. Let them eat, let them rest, let them feel safe. That's all I ask." The children, sensing the tension, pressed closer to their mother. The younger one clutched at her sleeve, tiny fingers digging in as though her presence alone could shield him from the world. The older boy peeked up at Kofi, hesitant, unsure, yet drawn to the quiet authority in his voice. Amara looked down at them, her chest tightening as the weight of responsibility collided with the faint spark of hope Kofi had offered. For the first time in months, Amara allowed herself to see beyond survival. She noticed the hunger in their eyes, not the abstract, distant hunger, but the tangible, urgent kind that had driven her every day. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Perhaps this man, this unexpected figure from her past, could indeed offer them a sliver of relief. Perhaps she didn't have to endure everything alone. The younger boy's cry escalated into a small wail, and Amara instinctively rocked him gently, murmuring soft reassurances she had repeated to herself countless times in the empty nights. "Shh. It's okay. We're okay," she whispered, though even she knew it was a fragile promise. Kofi's eyes softened at the sight, and without hesitation he reached over, producing a small packet of bottled water and a snack he had tucked away in the glove compartment for emergencies. "Here," he said gently. "They need this more than anything right now." Amara's hands trembled as she took the items, placing them carefully in her children's laps. The younger boy immediately began nibbling on the bread, his eyes wide with relief. The older boy hesitated, uncertain at first, then slowly began to eat, the tension in his small body easing slightly. For the first time in months, Amara saw something she had not allowed herself to feel: a hint of normalcy, a brief glimpse of the life her children deserved. Kofi watched silently, giving her space, yet remaining present. He had learned over the years that gestures of care were often more powerful than words, that sometimes the quiet offering of sustenance and safety could break down walls built from years of fear and pride. Amara's shoulders relaxed just slightly. The armor she had carried so carefully for so long began to feel less necessary, as though acknowledging her children's needs and accepting Kofi's help did not make her weak, it made her human. She looked at Kofi, and for the first time she allowed herself to speak without the sharp edge of defensive. I I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice cracking under the weight of vulnerability. "I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to trust anyone." Kofi's gaze remained steady. "You don't have to trust me all at once," he said softly. "Not yet. Just enough to let your children feel safe tonight. That's all I'm asking." The simplicity of the request, the absence of any hidden motive, struck a chord deep within Amara. She glanced down at the children, hungry, tired, yet slowly finding some comfort, and felt her resolve soften. Perhaps allowing herself this small act of acceptance was not betrayal, but an act of protection. The car continued through the streets, and for a moment the city outside seemed less oppressive. The noise, the chaos, the constant struggle faded into the background, leaving only the small, fragile unit of mother and children, and the man who had unexpectedly offered them a lifeline. Amara's mind wandered briefly to the past, to the nights she had spent alone, to the long, empty walks in search of food, to the sleepless nights listening to the boys' soft cries. The memory of betrayal and abandonment threatened to overwhelm her. But the sight of her children eating quietly, the presence of Kofi, and the gentle, unwavering insistence that she did not have to bear it all alone began to knit together something new, a fragile hope. Her lips quivered as she whispered softly, almost to herself, Maybe we can make it through tonight." Kofi offered a small, reassuring smile, the first real one of the day, and let the words hang in the air without pressing further. He understood that trust was not given freely. After so much pain, it had to be earned slowly, patiently, with action matching words. The children shifted again, settling into a more comfortable position, and Amara adjusted herself around them. She noticed for the first time the subtle signs of relief, the younger boy's breathing easing, the older boy's fingers relaxing from their tight grip on her clothes. And in that moment she allowed herself to believe, however cautiously, that perhaps help could exist without strings, that safety could arrive unexpectedly, and that maybe, just maybe, they could have a night without fear. The SUV continued steadily through the streets, carrying them toward warmth, sustenance, and a rare glimmer of hope. And as Amara held her children close, she felt the smallest, most fragile shift within herself. A willingness to accept that someone could care, that kindness could exist without expectation, and that for tonight they would not be alone. The car moved quietly through the streets of Accra, leaving behind the bustling chaos of the city center. The sounds of honking horns, shouting vendors, and the incessant hum of traffic faded into the distance, replaced by the rhythmic vibration of the SUV rolling along uneven asphalt. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, yet charged with a fragile anticipation. Amara held her children close, their small bodies warm against hers. The subtle tremble in their limbs a reminder of the months they had spent surviving on scraps and scraps of hope. I'll go," Amara finally whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with both fear and relief. Just for tonight." The words came out like a fragile truce, a surrender not of strength but of necessity. She glanced down at her sons, whose wide, wary eyes mirrored her own cautious hope. "We'll try," she added, her lips quivering. Kofi exhaled softly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's all I ask," he said quietly, his tone steady, filled with patience. He understood how monumental this step was for her. It was not just a matter of physical survival, it was the first tentative act of trust she had extended in months, maybe years. The children shifted slightly, sensing the shift in their mother's demeanor, and pressed closer to her for reassurance. As they drove, Kofi kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye, careful not to intrude, careful not to overwhelm her with words. He had learned early that trust could not be forced, only nurtured gently, carefully over time. He watched her hands, rough and calloused, clinging to her children, and felt a pang of empathy so sharp it made his chest tighten. She had carried this burden alone for far too long, and now, finally, she had allowed a sliver of hope to seep through the cracks of her armor. Where, where are we going? Amara asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had spent so long navigating the streets, so long wondering where the next meal would come from, that the very idea of safety seemed almost alien. Somewhere you and the boys can rest, Kofi replied softly. Somewhere safe where you don't have to worry about tonight or tomorrow. Just for now. Amara nodded, slightly unsure how to respond. The words sounded simple, almost too simple, yet the sincerity in his voice resonated deeply. She had learned to distrust kindness, to assume that help always came with hidden motives or a cost. But something about Kofi, the calm assurance, the quiet insistence, suggested that this offer was genuine. The streets became quieter as they left the congested neighborhoods behind, weaving through side streets and narrower alleys, the rhythm of the city fading to a soft murmur. The SUV's tires crunched over scattered gravel and uneven pavement, each jolt a reminder of the harshness of the world outside the protective bubble of the car. Amara clutched her children closer, their small arms wrapped around her tightly, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a night free from fear, hunger, and exposure. Her thoughts drifted back to the past, the nights spent searching for work that didn't exist, the desperate hours scrounging for scraps of food, the countless moments of silence as her children slept beside her, their tiny breaths shallow and uneven. And now, just as despair had seemed inescapable, a lifeline appeared, a man from her past who had somehow returned at the precise moment she had almost given up. The coincidence was almost absurd, yet it carried the weight of destiny, a thread pulling her toward a future she had dared not hope for. The younger boy let out a soft whimper, rubbing at his eyes with a small, chubby fist. Amara's heart clenched. "Shh. It's okay," she murmured, her voice trembling. "We're almost there. It's going to be all right." She looked at Kofi, who nodded gently, acknowledging her words without judgment, silently reinforcing the fragile sense of trust forming between them. After several minutes, they arrived at a quiet, tree-lined avenue. The SUV slowed as Kofi guided them into a driveway flanked by neatly trimmed hedges. The house before them was large, its walls painted a soft cream-color, windows gleaming in the morning light. Warmth radiated from within, visible even through the tinted glass, hinting at safety, comfort, and care. Amara's chest tightened as she took in the scene. The house was beautiful, far removed from the harsh streets she had traversed for so long. It felt almost unreal, as though she had stepped into a dream she had not dared to imagine. The children pressed closer to her, their small hands gripping the fabric of her dress. Their eyes widened at the sight of the house, the manicured lawn, and the subtle glow of light through the windows. Amara felt a mix of awe and anxiety. Everything was so unfamiliar, so far removed from the rough, unpredictable streets she had called home. She could almost feel the eyes of her past experiences watching, judging, questioning whether she deserved this safety. Kofi noticed her hesitation and offered a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to feel comfortable yet," he said gently. "Just know that you and the boys are safe here. That's all that matters right now." Amara nodded slowly, her fingers still trembling as she adjusted the children in her arms. "Safe." She whispered the word, feeling foreign, almost surreal. For months she had not known safety, not truly. Even the concept had seemed distant, unattainable. And yet here it was, tangible, waiting for her and her children to step inside. With careful movements, Kofi opened the car doors and guided them toward the entrance. The children hesitated, at first their small feet dragging slightly against the gravel, but Amara encouraged them softly. "Come on. It's all right," she murmured, trying to mask her own nervousness. Slowly they stepped forward, taking tentative, cautious steps toward warmth, nourishment, and the promise of a night without fear. As they entered the house, the smell of fresh linens, subtle spices, and the faint aroma of breakfast filled the air. The children's eyes widened in awe, taking in the soft carpets, polished floors, and the inviting glow of the kitchen. Amara's heart ached with a strange mix of relief and guilt, relief that her children would be safe and guilt that they had endured so much for so long. Kofi stepped back slightly, giving her space, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to do anything yet," he said softly. "Just let them feel at home. Eat, rest, breathe. That's all I ask for now." Amara nodded, taking a deep breath, allowing herself to finally exhale some of the tension she had carried for months. She guided the children toward a cozy seating area where a small basket of fresh fruit and bread awaited. The younger boy's eyes lit up and he immediately reached for a piece, his small fingers trembling with excitement and hunger. The older boy hesitated, but seeing his sibling eat, he slowly began to nibble as well, the tension in his small frame easing slightly. For the first time in months, Amara allowed herself to smile, faint and tentative but real. She watched her children eat, their faces softening from the constant strain of survival. The warmth of the house, the aroma of food, and the quiet assurance of Kofi's presence began to dissolve some of the fear she had carried so heavily. Kofi watched her carefully, understanding the magnitude of this moment. It was not just about a meal or a safe place to sleep. It was the first step in rebuilding trust, in allowing Amara to accept help, in showing that even after years of struggle, there was a possibility of care, stability, and hope. Amara felt a small shift within herself, a fragile acknowledgement that perhaps she didn't have to bear everything alone. That for tonight at least they could know warmth, safety, and the promise of a new beginning. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the morning air conditioning and the faint clatter of kitchen utensils as Kofi's staff prepared breakfast. Amara's children clutched her hands as she guided them toward the dining table. Their eyes, wide with curiosity and awe, scanned the room nervously. The polished wooden floor reflected the warm morning light. The table was set with gleaming plates and polished cutlery, and the aroma of traditional Ghanaian breakfast filled the air. Freshly cooked jollof rice, fried plantains, pepper soup, and a loaf of soft bread waiting to be shared. For months, Amara had barely eaten enough to feel satisfied. Hunger had been a constant companion, gnawing at her, keeping her restless at night. And now, here was a table filled with food, abundant and warm, as if the world itself was extending an unexpected kindness. She felt a flutter of disbelief, a mixture of fear and hope, and she hesitated at the edge of the table. Kofi noticed the hesitation. He stepped back slightly, giving her the space she needed, yet his eyes never left her. "Take your time," he said softly. "There's no rush. You don't have to do anything yet except eat. Let them eat." Amara nodded slowly. She lowered her children into the chairs, careful not to overwhelm them. The younger boy's hands shook as he reached for a piece of fried plantain, while the older one picked at a small mound of rice, his eyes darting between his mother and the food in front of him. Amara herself reached for a plate, her fingers trembling slightly. The first bite she took of the spicy jollof rice filled her senses, the rich aroma, the perfect balance of flavors, the warmth in her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes almost instantly. She tried to hide them, pressing a hand to her lips, but Kofi saw and chose to look away, giving her the dignity to experience the moment without comment. Her children, unaware of her inner turmoil, eagerly dug in, the younger boy giggling as he smeared a bit of rice on his cheek. "Mommy, this is the best food ever," he whispered between bites, his small voice full of wonder. Amara's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and joy. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a sense of abundance, a feeling of normalcy she had long forgotten. She glanced at Kofi, whose calm, reassuring presence seemed to fill the room with a quiet authority. No words, no judgment, only support, patience, and the understanding that this small act of care was monumental. The children ate eagerly, their small hands moving with surprising coordination, the tension of months of hunger melting away with each bite. Amara watched them, her heart aching and yet swelling with a strange, tentative happiness. She allowed herself to smile faintly, a fragile but real expression that she hadn't permitted in a long time. Kofi observed quietly, understanding the significance of the moment. This meal was not just sustenance, it was the first step in restoring dignity and allowing Amara and her children to feel human again. The vulnerability, the gratitude, the small flicker of trust forming in her eyes, it all spoke louder than any words could. "Mommy," the older boy said suddenly, his voice soft but full of awe, "can we stay here just for tonight?" Amara swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Yes, my loves," she whispered. "Just for tonight we can stay. It's all right." She pressed her lips to the younger boy's head, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, a rhythm of survival and resilience. The children's laughter, faint at first, began to fill the room, mingling with the soft clatter of utensils and the warm morning light. Amara felt an unfamiliar ease settle over her, a fragile, tentative feeling she hadn't known in months. "Peace." Kofi finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "They're safe," he said simply, as if stating a fact that needed no embellishment. "And so are you. Let this moment be enough for now." Amara nodded slowly, taking another bite of the food, savoring the warmth and flavors. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, the tightness in her chest loosening for the first time since she had been abandoned. She allowed herself to notice the details, the soft glow of the lamp, the polished surfaces, the quiet professionalism of the staff moving in the background. All of it was a stark contrast to the dusty streets, the hunger, the constant vigilance she had endured. Her mind wandered briefly to the past, the nights she had cried silently, rocking her children to sleep on the cold streets, praying for some semblance of safety. She remembered the relentless hunger, the exhaustion, the constant fear of someone taking away what little she had. And now here she was, surrounded by warmth, food, and care, feeling a glimmer of hope she hadn't allowed herself to imagine in years. Kofi's presence was steady and calming. He had not imposed himself, had not demanded gratitude or acknowledgement. Instead, he had offered a safe space, a warm meal, and the quiet assurance that they were not alone. Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek, and for a moment she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to feel gratitude without guilt. The children finished their meal, their small hands wiping at their mouth. Crumbs scattered across the table. Amara smiled, a true smile this time, watching them enjoy something as simple as food, a reminder that even the smallest comforts could bring immense joy. She looked at Kofi, her eyes filled with an unspoken acknowledgement. This was not pity nor charity. It was care, pure and unadulterated, and for the first time she allowed herself to accept it. After the children had eaten, a staff member quietly approached, offering clean clothes for the boys. Amara helped them change, noticing how the simple act of being clothed in clean garments without the grime of the streets made them stand taller, smile brighter. Their laughter filled the room, a melody that reminded her of what childhood should be: safe, nurtured, full of small joys. Kofi watched from a short distance, silently acknowledging the significance of these small victories. Each bite of food, each laugh, each moment of ease for the children was a step toward rebuilding their lives. Amara's initial hesitancy, her fear and her disbelief, slowly gave way to a quiet sense of gratitude and cautious optimism. She began to see in the simplest of acts a world where care and trust could exist even after so much suffering. As the morning light continued to filter through the windows, Amara sat back slightly, her children playing quietly at the table, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was fragile, tentative, and easily shattered, but it existed nonetheless. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth, food, and the steady presence of Kofi, she realized that perhaps the world could offer kindness even when it had long seemed impossible. For the first time in many months, Amara felt a small measure of peace. She allowed herself to breathe deeply, to savor the simple act of nourishment, and to acknowledge the possibility that perhaps things could get better. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she and her children would sleep without fear, without hunger, and with a glimpse of the life they deserved. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kofi's home, casting soft golden light across the room. Amara sat on the edge of a comfortable chair, her children playing quietly nearby. Their laughter a delicate counterpoint to the storm of memories swirling in her mind. The warmth of the house, the aroma of freshly cooked food, and the soft hum of domestic activity contrasted sharply with the relentless hardships she had endured on the streets of Accra. And yet, despite this temporary refuge, the past pressed on her with the weight of years refusing to be ignored. Kofi settled across from her, his gaze calm yet insistent. "Amara," he said gently, "if you want to, you can tell me what happened. I want to understand." Amara exhaled shakily, her fingers twisting the fabric of her dress as though holding onto it could anchor her through the flood of memories. It's a long story," she whispered, "and it's not easy to tell." Her voice trembled, carrying the exhaustion and pain of countless nights spent alone fighting for the survival of herself and her children. Kofi nodded quietly, allowing her the space to speak. Understanding that the weight of trust she was placing in him was as fragile as it was monumental. "I met him when I was young," she began, her voice low, hesitant. "I thought he was everything I wanted. Charming, attentive, convincing. He promised me the world, Amara. He said I'd have a life full of happiness, a family, stability. I believed him. I trusted him with all I had." Her hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white. "But when I told him I was pregnant, everything changed." Her eyes flickered toward the children, now absorbed in a small game of stacking blocks, their innocence, a painful reminder of what had been taken from her. "At first he pretended to be happy," she continued, voice quivering. "But I could see the fear in his eyes. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored, and one day, he was gone. Just gone. Without a word, without explanation. And I was left with nothing. No support, no guidance, no care." Kofi's jaw tightened as he listened, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He had seen many injustices in his life, but hearing the story of Amara's abandonment, the way a man could leave a woman and children to fend for themselves, stirred a deep, protective rage. Yet he remained silent, allowing her to continue to release the burden she had carried for so long. "My family, they turned their backs on me," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "My father. He said I had brought shame to the family. My mother." She cried, but she didn't stop him. "I had nowhere to go, no money, no job, no help, just the streets and the endless struggle to keep my children alive." Kofi leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "No one should endure that, Amara. Not a mother, not children, not anyone." His eyes softened as he took in her exhaustion, the lines etched into her face, the invisible scars that spoke of years of hardship. "That man, he was a coward. He left when he should have stayed. He abandoned you and the boys. And that is not a reflection of your worth." Amara swallowed hard, bitterness and hurt mingling in her expression. He didn't even check on them once, not a single call, not a thought. And I had to be everything all at once. I had to survive for them. Her voice cracked, the raw emotion almost unbearable. And yet every day was a fight. Every day I wondered if I would even have food to give them. And now you appear offering to help. Why me? Why now? Kofi exhaled slowly. "Because I couldn't ignore it," he said softly. "Seeing you on the streets, seeing the boys, I couldn't walk away. Not when someone I know is suffering like this. Not when you've carried so much alone for so long." Amara looked away, her fingers shaking slightly as she clutched the edge of her chair. The tears she had been holding back fell freely now, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to grieve the years of suffering. the loneliness, the betrayal, and the injustice she had endured. The children, sensing the intensity of their mother's emotions, paused their game and glanced at her wide-eyed and attentive, their small hands still entwined with hers. "I was proud," Amara whispered between sobs. "I thought I could do everything myself. I didn't want anyone to see me fail. I didn't want anyone to pity me. I thought if I just held on, if I just kept pushing, things would get better. But they didn't. They only got worse." Kofi reached out, placing a gentle hand near hers, though careful not to intrude. "You didn't fail, Amara. You survived. You protected your children. That takes more strength than most can imagine. And now you don't have to face it alone anymore." Her eyes met his, a mixture of grief, mistrust, and tentative hope shining through. I laughed at you once," she admitted softly, a faint trace of the girl she had once been breaking through. "Back in school, when you liked me, I thought you weren't enough. And now, here you are offering to help me, and I have nothing. I'm the one who is broken." "Life doesn't work like that," Kofi replied quietly. "This isn't about what you had or didn't have in the past. This is about what's right now. You don't have to endure the pain alone. Not tonight. Not ever." Amara's lips quivered and she shook her head. "I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to owe anyone anything." Kofi let out a short laugh, soft and reassuring. "A burden, Amara? Do you know how many people I help who I don't even know? You are someone I know, someone I've cared about in my own way. If I can help strangers, why wouldn't I help you? You are not a burden. You are deserving of care and safety." Amara's eyes welled up again, and she looked down at her children. The younger boy's small hand reached for hers, and the older boy's gaze met hers with a quiet trust she had almost forgotten existed. The walls she had built over years of suffering began to crumble. She allowed herself to believe, however tentatively, that perhaps this moment could be different. Perhaps finally help could exist without strings, without judgment, without betrayal. I'll try," she whispered finally, voice trembling but resolute. "I'll try just for them." Kofi smiled softly, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "That's all I asked," he said. And for the first time, Amara felt a fragile sense of relief, a fleeting hope that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different. It could be. The children stirred, sensing the shift in their mother's demeanor, their tiny bodies relaxing slightly. Amara drew a deep, shaky breath and allowed herself to be present in the room, not thinking about the streets, the hunger, or the exhaustion. For now, there was only this moment, a small measure of peace, the first spark of hope in months of darkness, and the promise of care that could carry them forward. The morning light streamed softly through the tall windows of Kofi's home, illuminating the polished floors and the gentle warmth that seemed to emanate from every corner. Amara sat quietly in the living room, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the children playing nearby with blocks and small toys that Kofi had provided. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe without the constant tension of fear pressing against her chest. The walls of the house were sturdy, warm, and protective, a stark contrast to the makeshift shelters she had endured on the streets. And now, sitting across from Kofi, she felt the weight of months of suffering pressing against her, mingled with the fragile spark of hope he had offered. Kofi leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but insistent. "Amara, you don't have to face any of this alone anymore. I want to help you, not because of the past, but because I care about you and your children." Her lips quivered as she absorbed his words. The concept of receiving help without judgment, without expectation, felt almost alien. She had spent years carrying the weight of survival on her own, learning to trust no one. Yet here was Kofi, patient, unwavering, and willing to offer assistance without condition. She glanced at her children, their innocent eyes reflecting a quiet curiosity and a cautious hope. Perhaps she thought this was a chance she could allow herself to accept. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted softly. I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to trust again. Her voice trembled, weighted with both fear and the desire to survive. You don't have to trust me all at once, Kofi replied gently. Not yet. Just enough to let your children be safe and cared for. That's all I'm asking for now. One step at a time. Amara swallowed hard, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. For months, she had carried the burden of survival entirely on her own. Now she realized accepting help did not diminish her strength. It acknowledged the harshness of reality while opening a door to possibility. She gave a small nod, hesitant but deliberate. Okay, just for now, I'll try. Kofi smiled softly, the first real smile that had reached her since the day she had been abandoned. That's all I need to hear, he said. One night at a time, we'll make sure your children and you have what you need. Then we can plan for the days ahead. He rose from his seat and motioned toward the children. Why don't we start with the basics? A warm bath, clean clothes, and a proper meal. Then we can talk about what comes next. Amara glanced at her sons, their faces lighting up with curiosity at the prospect of bathing in a warm tub and wearing clean clothes. Her heart ached with a mixture of relief and guilt, relief that they could finally experience normalcy, and guilt that it had taken so long for them to have such simple comforts. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus on the present moment rather than the years of struggle behind them. The children were guided to a spacious bathroom where the warm water ran freely, a small luxury they had never experienced. Laughter and squeals filled the air as Kofi's staff helped them clean and dress in fresh, neatly folded clothes. Amara watched quietly, a small, tentative smile playing at her lips. The sight of her children laughing and relaxing for the first time in months stirred a deep, almost forgotten emotion within her joy. After the children were settled, Kofi motioned for Amara to follow him into the study, a quiet room filled with shelves of books and soft leather chairs. He gestured for her to sit. Now let's think about the next steps, he said. Not everything at once, but a plan. A way to rebuild your life gradually, safely. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted herself in the chair. I've been out of work for so long, I don't even know where to start. I'm afraid I'll fail. You won't, Kofi reassured her. We'll start with small tasks, administrative work, record-keeping, learning to navigate the office. You'll learn as you go. Mistakes are part of the process. What matters is effort, consistency, and the willingness to grow. I know you're capable. She hesitated, doubt clouding her mind. And what if the other employees don't respect me? What if they think I don't belong here? Kofi's expression softened but remained firm. Then they will answer to me. You belong here because I say you do. Not because of your past, not because of your knowledge, but because you are a person who has fought for everything in life. That alone makes you strong enough. A small flicker of hope warmed her chest. The idea of being guided, supported, and allowed to grow at her own pace was foreign but enticing. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. For them. For my children. Kofi smiled, a subtle warmth in his eyes. That's all I need. One step at a time, Amara. We start small and together we'll work toward bigger goals. The children, now clean and dressed in fresh clothes, peeked into the study curiously, their eyes wide and bright. Amara smiled down at them, feeling a mix of pride and relief. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a life where they could sleep at night without fear, where meals were regular and warm, and where small joys like laughter, play, and education were part of their daily existence. Kofi reached out, placing a hand near hers without touching, a subtle gesture of reassurance. This is just the beginning. he said softly. Tonight, you and the children are safe. Tomorrow we plan. The day after we build. And slowly, things will get better. Amara nodded, tears threatening to spill again. The weight of the past months, the years of struggle, and the constant fight for survival began to lift, even if only slightly. For the first time, she felt a flicker of control over her life, a sense that perhaps the future was not entirely dictated by hardship, but could be shaped with care, guidance, and patience. As the morning wore on, the children played quietly nearby, the room filled with a fragile, growing sense of normalcy. Amara watched them, heart swelling, and allowed herself to hope. Kofi's presence, steady and non-judgmental, offered her something she hadn't felt in a long time, the ability to trust. Not blindly, not completely, but enough to accept, help enough to believe that perhaps life could be different. The journey ahead was uncertain. There would be challenges, adjustments, and moments of doubt. But for now, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She and her children had been given a chance to heal, to grow, to rebuild. And for the first time in months, she felt a quiet, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, life could offer more than survival. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light through the tall windows of Kofi's house. The children had finished their breakfast, their small faces glowing with a mixture of excitement and relief. Amara watched them, a sense of peace washing over her, yet a quiet anxiety lingered. How could she truly navigate this sudden change? After months of uncertainty and struggle, the idea of stability felt unfamiliar, almost impossible to trust. And yet Kofi had made one thing abundantly clear: she did not have to face this alone. Amara, Kofi said gently, his voice soft but deliberate today. We start building more than just safety. We start preparing for the future. Your children deserve more than just survival. They deserve a chance to thrive. And that begins with small steps. Amara's lips quivered. She glanced at her children, who were now peering at Kofi with curious eyes. Their innocence and trust weighed heavily on her heart. She had fought for them every day, keeping them alive in conditions no child should endure. And now she realized she could give them more than mere survival. She could offer them hope. Kofi reached toward a neatly stacked set of boxes near the doorway. First step: new clothes. Proper clothes for the children. Something clean, comfortable, and practical. It's a small thing, but it matters. Confidence begins with how we see ourselves and how the world sees us. Amara nodded slowly, hesitant yet willing. The children's faces lit up as Kofi's staff began bringing out soft, brightly colored garments, shirts, shorts, dresses, shoes, and socks, all neatly folded and ready. The younger boy squealed with delight, immediately tugging at a shirt, while the older boy examined a pair of polished shoes with wide eyes. Amara felt tears welling up, realizing that these simple items, taken for granted by many, represented a milestone for her family. A tangible step out of poverty and neglect. Go ahead, Kofi said softly. Try them on. Take your time. No rush. The children eagerly began changing, laughter and chatter filling the room. Amara helped them, adjusting collars, tying shoelaces, smoothing hair. With each movement, she felt a subtle shift inside herself, a cautious hope that perhaps life could be different, that the endless struggle had not erased all possibility for happiness. Once dressed, the children looked at themselves in the mirror, their eyes, bright faces, radiant. The older boy spun in his new clothes, a broad smile spreading across his face. The younger boy clapped his hands, squealing with excitement at the feel of the soft fabric against his skin. Amara's chest tightened as she observed this simple joy, the first real moment of pride and happiness she had allowed herself in months. They look beautiful, she whispered, voice catching with emotion. I can't believe this. They look like children should look, happy, cared for. Kofi smiled gently. They are, and this is only the beginning. Today we provide for their immediate needs. Tomorrow we ensure they have education, health, and a safe environment to grow. One step at a time, Amara. This is the foundation for a better future. Amara took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words settle. Education, health, stability concepts that had seemed unattainable during months of survival on the streets were suddenly within reach. For the first time, she allowed herself to envision a future where her children could thrive rather than merely exist. Next, Kofi continued, we schedule a full checkup for both of them. Nutrition, growth, and overall health. You need to know they are strong, and we need to ensure any gaps from the past months are addressed. Amara nodded, swallowing hard. Yes. Yes, that's very important. I feared they were too small, too weak. I couldn't provide enough. Her voice faltered as she admitted the constant worry she had carried. I've failed them in so many ways. You haven't failed them, Kofi replied firmly. You've survived against incredible odds. That alone is extraordinary. But now we can do more. That's what matters. Today marks the first step toward giving them a chance to be fully healthy, fully supported, and fully themselves. The children were led into the SUV again, now excited for a different kind of journey. The visit to a reputable clinic for a complete medical checkup. Amara remained close, her heart pounding as she thought of how far they had come from the streets, from the hunger, from the exhaustion. The clinic was clean, bright, and welcoming, with staff who smiled warmly at the children and Amara immediately putting them at ease. The examinations revealed some minor malnutrition, but nothing that could not be addressed with proper care and diet. The doctor reassured Amara, explaining how a structured plan of nutrition, schooling, and regular checkups could restore her children's health completely over time. Amara felt a wave of relief mingled with a profound sense of gratitude. For the first time in years, she could see a tangible path forward, a real chance to reclaim the life her children deserved. Kofi stayed close throughout, quietly observing, ensuring that Amara felt supported without being overwhelmed. You see, he said softly, every step we take now builds the future. Today it's clothes and health. Tomorrow it's school skills and growth. One step at a time together. Amara nodded, tears prickling her eyes. I can do this. For them I can try, she whispered. Her voice carried both the weight of her past struggles and the fragile hope she allowed herself to feel in this moment. The children, now clean fed and clothed, played quietly on the clinic's waiting area floor, their laughter mingling with the soft hum of activity around them. Amara watched, her chest swelling with a mix of relief, pride, and tentative joy. She realized that these small steps, clothes, meals, health checkups, represented more than survival. They were the building blocks of a life she had dared not imagine, a life filled with hope, stability, and care. As they left the clinic and returned home, the children chattered happily about their day, pointing at the colors of their new clothes, the warmth of the bath, and the kindness of the doctor. Amara smiled softly, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The burden of survival was still there, but now it was shared, carried not only by her but also by someone who genuinely cared. That evening, as the family settled into the warmth of Kofi's home, Amara allowed herself a quiet moment to reflect. For the first time, she felt that life could be more than mere endurance. That night, her children would sleep in comfort with full stomachs and clean clothes, and tomorrow she would take another step forward, guided by patience, care, and the support of someone who believed in her. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in many months, Amara allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a long time: hope. The following morning arrived with a soft golden light spilling through the windows of Kofi's home. Amara sat quietly at the breakfast table, her children already busy with a small puzzle on the floor, their laughter bright and melodic. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of anticipation, though it was accompanied by a subtle knot of anxiety. Today marked a new beginning, not only for her children, who were now clothed, fed, and healthy, but for herself. She was about to step into a world she had not touched in years, a formal workplace filled with people who would expect competence, confidence, and presence. Kofi entered the room carrying a folder of neatly organized documents. Are you ready for today? He asked gently, his eyes full of reassurance. Amara hesitated, taking a deep breath. I think so, she murmured. I've been out of work for so long. I don't even know if I can do this. You can, Kofi said firmly. And you won't be alone. Today is about learning, observing, and taking small steps. Mistakes are part of the process. They do not define you. What matters is effort, persistence, and the willingness to grow. Amara nodded slowly, swallowing hard. The fear of failure, so ingrained after months of survival, lingered in her chest. But the warmth of Kofi's encouragement provided a stabilizing anchor. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this could be a safe space for learning, for growth, and for rebuilding a life she had nearly lost hope of reclaiming. The children were carefully set up with a trusted caregiver for the day. Their faces bright with curiosity, the novelty of their new routine bringing a sense of excitement. Amara felt a pang of guilt as always leaving them even for a few hours, but she reminded herself that this step was necessary for their future, for stability, and for her own growth. Kofi drove her to the office, a modern building that gleamed with polished glass and the soft bustle of organized activity. Amara's chest tightened as she observed the efficiency of the staff moving through their tasks. The soft click of keyboards, the low murmur of conversations, and the air of confidence that permeated the space. She felt like an outsider, acutely aware of her inexperience and the gap between her survival instincts and the polished expectations of office life. You belong here, Kofi said softly, sensing her apprehension. Not because of your background, not because of the past. You belong here because you are strong, capable, and determined. Trust yourself. Amara drew a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had been strong in the face of hunger, abandonment, and fear. She had survived months of relentless struggle and had kept her children alive against overwhelming odds. Perhaps she thought that strength could translate in part to this new environment. Kofi introduced her to the staff. This is Amara, he said warmly. She will be joining our team today. Please provide guidance and support as she adjusts. The staff members nodded politely, some offering smiles, others curious glances. Amara felt the weight of their scrutiny, the unspoken questions about her competence and background. She swallowed, reminding herself that this was a new beginning, a chance to prove to herself, not anyone else, that she could learn, adapt, and succeed. Her first tasks were simple: organizing files, entering basic data, observing processes, and gradually familiarizing herself with office routines. At first, the work felt overwhelming. The unfamiliar technology, the precise expectations, and the subtle social dynamics of the office created a constant low-level tension. Amara stumbled at first, making small errors as she adjusted, her heart racing with anxiety at each misstep. Kofi noticed from across the room and approached her quietly. Amara, he said softly, you are learning. Mistakes are not failure, they are part of growth. Focus on understanding, not perfection. She nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. His words reminded her of the months she had spent surviving alone, where every small mistake could have been catastrophic. Here she was, being allowed to learn, to fail, and to improve. It was a foreign concept, yet strangely liberating. As the morning progressed, Amara began to find her rhythm. She organized files with greater efficiency, entered data more confidently, and even interacted with colleagues when prompted. Each small success bolstered her confidence, though the anxiety never fully disappeared. Yet with each step she felt a growing sense of agency, a recognition that she could navigate this world just as she had navigated the streets, only now with guidance, support, and stability. Around midday, a client arrived, unexpectedly upset about an issue with a delivery. Amara's initial instinct was to freeze, her anxiety spiking, but she remembered Kofi's instructions: listen, understand, and respond with calm attention. She took a deep breath. listened carefully to the client-made notes, and calmly relayed the issue to the appropriate department while reassuring the client that it would be resolved. The man's tension eased, and he left with a grateful nod. Kofi, observing from a distance, allowed himself a small smile. "See," he said quietly, "you handled that well. You have the skills, Amara. You just needed the opportunity to apply them." Amara felt a surge of pride, subtle yet profound. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she was not merely surviving. She was contributing, learning, and being recognized for her competence. It was a small victory, but it mattered immensely. The afternoon passed in a steady rhythm, with Amara learning new tasks, asking questions, and gradually gaining confidence in her abilities. The children, meanwhile, returned home from their caregiver in high spirits, eager to recount their day and engage with their mother. Amara felt the tug of their energy, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and hope. She realized that her efforts at the office were not just for herself, they were for them. Each step she took in this new world was a step toward a future where they could thrive, free from the shadows of neglect and fear. By the end of the day, Amara's confidence had grown significantly. She had made mistakes, yes, but each one had been a lesson rather than a failure. The rhythm of work, the support of Kofi, and the small, tangible successes of the day had begun to shift her perception of herself. She was no longer merely a survivor of the streets. She was a woman capable of growth, learning, and resilience in a new and unfamiliar environment. As they left the office together, Kofi's voice broke the silence. "You did well today, Amara. Remember, this is just the beginning. Tomorrow you'll build on today. Step by step, we'll create stability, confidence, and a future worth striving for." Amara nodded, her chest heavy with emotion. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel not only relief but also a cautious optimism. A belief that she could navigate this new world, support her children, and reclaim a life that had been nearly stolen from her. The ride home was quiet, punctuated only by the soft chatter of the children recounting their day. Amara gazed out the window, reflecting on the day's events. She realized that growth was not instantaneous, it was incremental, built from small victories, patient guidance, and the courage to face unfamiliar challenges. And with Kofi's unwavering support, she felt ready to take the next steps, not just for herself, but for the children who depended on her resilience and hope. The morning sun filtered through the office windows, casting a warm glow across the desks and filling the room with the gentle hum of productivity. Amara arrived promptly, her steps measured but confident, carrying with her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. The first weeks had been a mixture of uncertainty, learning, and adaptation, but gradually she was finding her rhythm. The office that once seemed overwhelming now felt navigable, familiar in its structure, and most importantly, a place where she could begin to rebuild herself. Kofi greeted her with a soft smile as she entered. "Good morning, Amara. How are the children today?" "They slept well," Amara replied quietly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "For the first time in months, I think they feel safe." Her gaze softened as she thought of her children resting in the warmth of Kofi's home, dressed in clean clothes, their small bodies no longer tense from hunger or fear. "Good," Kofi said, his tone gentle but firm. "A sense of security is the foundation for everything else, learning, growth, and confidence. When they feel safe, you can focus on building your skills and your future." Amara nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She had always been a protector, a guardian for her children, carrying the burden of survival on her own shoulders. Now, for the first time, she could allow herself to consider that support could exist without strings attached, that guidance could come without judgment, and that progress, however incremental, was possible. Her morning began with organizing files, a task that had initially intimidated her but now felt manageable. Each document she placed in order, each record she entered correctly, brought a quiet satisfaction. She noticed her own hands moving with purpose, her mind sharpening as patterns began to emerge. Mistakes still occurred, but Kofi had taught her to treat them as opportunities to learn rather than failures. Around mid-morning, a situation arose that tested her newly found confidence. A client, frustrated by a delayed delivery, approached the office with a sharp tone demanding answers. Amara's initial instinct was to freeze, her pulse quickening as anxiety surged. But she remembered Kofi's guidance: listen carefully, respond calmly, and act with confidence. Taking a deep breath, she greeted the client politely, allowing him to vent his frustrations while taking careful notes. Her hands were steady, her tone measured, and for the first time in such a scenario, she felt in control rather than overwhelmed. She reassured the client that the matter would be resolved promptly, liaising with the relevant department and ensuring that the issue was addressed efficiently. When the client left, visibly satisfied, Amara felt a swell of pride and relief. Kofi, observing from a distance, offered a subtle nod of approval. "See," he said quietly, "you handled that well. You have the capability, it was always there. Today you proved it to yourself." Amara allowed herself a small, tentative smile. For the first time, she realized that competence was not something she had lost with hardship. Her skills, resilience, and intelligence had merely been dormant, waiting for the right environment and support to flourish. The afternoon passed with steady work, and as the day drew to a close, Amara found herself reflecting on the progress she and her family had made. Her children were thriving in the safe environment Kofi had provided. Her confidence in the office was growing steadily, and the sense of fear and hopelessness that had dominated her life for so long was beginning to wane. Returning home, she was greeted by the bright smiles of her children. The younger boy ran into her arms, his laughter ringing through the house, while the older boy proudly displayed a drawing he had made during his day. Amara's heart ached with joy. For months, such moments had been rare, fleeting, and overshadowed by the struggle for survival. Now they were becoming part of daily life, a sign that the family was healing slowly but surely. Kofi joined them in the living room, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. "They're happy," he said softly. "And when they feel secure, you feel secure. That is the first step toward rebuilding a life. Trust, stability, and care, they create an environment where growth is possible." Amara nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I've spent so long protecting them from the world, from hunger, from fear," she whispered. "And now I can protect them in a different way. I can help them grow. I can give them hope." Kofi placed a reassuring hand near hers, his presence steady and calming. "And you're not doing it alone," he said. "You never will be. Today is just another step, tomorrow another. Each day the children will thrive, and so will you." Amara looked around the house, the warm light casting gentle shadows across the room. The furniture, the cleanliness, the quiet order, it was a stark contrast to the harsh, unpredictable streets she had once called home. And yet it did not intimidate her. Instead, it inspired a tentative optimism. She realized that her family had entered a space where care, stability, and growth were not just possible, they were actively being nurtured. The evening passed with quiet activities. The children were fed, bathed, and settled into their beds. Amara sat in a chair nearby, observing their gentle breathing, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in months. Kofi remained in the room, offering guidance and support without intrusion, allowing her to absorb the quiet victories of the day. "This," Kofi said softly, "breaking the silence is what we're building. Not just a home, but a life where trust, stability, and care create a foundation for the future. Your children will grow up knowing safety, nourishment, and love. And you, Amara, you will find your confidence, your purpose, and your own strength once more." Amara nodded, her chest swelling with gratitude and cautious hope. She realized that trust had begun to take root, not blind trust, but a measured belief that with support and patience her family could thrive. The fear that had dominated her life for so long was gradually giving way to a quiet determination to embrace opportunity to nurture her children and to allow herself to grow alongside them. As the night deepened, Amara allowed herself to reflect on the progress of the past weeks. From the moment she had met Kofi again on the streets to the warm meals, clean clothes, medical checkups, and now her first real steps into the workplace, the path forward was becoming tangible. It was not easy and challenges would continue to arise, but for the first time she felt equipped, supported, and capable of facing them. The children slept peacefully, a sign of the security and care now present in their lives. Amara sat quietly, taking in the calm, the warmth, and the small victories that had accumulated over the past days. She allowed herself to hope, not recklessly, not blindly, but with a measured optimism that was earned through struggle, survival, and the slow building of trust. Kofi's presence was a constant reassurance. He did not demand gratitude, nor did he expect perfection. Instead, he offered stability, patience, and guidance, allowing Amara to grow in confidence and competence step by step. And as she sat in the quiet of the evening, watching her children breathe peacefully in their beds, she realized that for the first time in many months, she felt safe, truly safe. The quiet rhythm of the afternoon in Kofi's office was suddenly interrupted by a tense knock at the door. Amara, who had been assisting with some administrative work, froze instinctively. The knock was firm, authoritative, and it carried with it a sense of entitlement that immediately made her chest tighten. She instinctively glanced at Kofi, who rose calmly from his seat, his expression neutral but attentive. "Come in," he said, his voice steady. The door opened and a man stepped inside, tall, imposing, and with an air of confidence that contrasted sharply with the vulnerability Amara felt. His eyes scanned the room and they rested briefly on her children, who were in the adjacent play area, unaware of the tension building. Amara's breath caught. This was him, the father who had abandoned them. The man who had left her alone to struggle, to fight for survival, and to raise two children without support. "I heard Amara is staying here," the man said, his voice sharp and demanding. "I want to see my children. I have every right to see them." Kofi's expression hardened slightly, but he remained composed. "Who are you?" he asked evenly. "And why are you demanding access to children who have been left without care for months?" The man's jaw tightened. "I am their father. They are my blood. I have a right to them. I came to reclaim what is mine." Amara felt a surge of anger rise from deep within her. The man had abandoned them, ignored their struggles, and yet he now believed he had a claim over her children. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice came out firm and steady. "Your children. They are my children. I raised them. I fed them when you left. I kept them safe when you weren't there. And now you walk in here as if your absence never happened, demanding what you abandoned." The man's eyes narrowed. "I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean I don't love them. I want to see them now." Amara's heart pounded. Memories of long nights spent scavenging for food, of walking miles in the heat just to find scraps of whispering prayers for their survival, came rushing back. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "Love, you abandoned them. You left us to starve, to fear, to survive on nothing. You call that love? You were never there, not once. Not a single phone call, not a single moment of care. And now you come demanding rights as if we owe you something." Kofi stepped slightly forward, his voice calm but firm. "A right is earned, not claimed. Where were you when your children were hungry? Where were you when they had no place to sleep? Where were you when their mother, your children's mother, did everything she could to protect them?" The man's face darkened, but he opened his mouth to protest. Amara raised her hand, stopping him. "No. You made a choice. You left. You chose your own comfort over our survival, and you will not take that away from us now. My children are safe, and they will remain safe. I will not allow you to hurt them as you hurt us before." The man's fists clenched, his jaw tight with frustration. "I have a right," he shouted. "Yes," Amara replied, her voice strong and unwavering, "a right to know the truth. A right to acknowledge your mistakes. But not the right to enter our lives as if nothing happened. You abandoned us. You will not dictate our future now." Kofi observed the confrontation with measured calm. He knew the danger of letting anger escalate, but he also understood the catharsis that Amara needed to face. "Leave," he said firmly. "You are not entitled to demand anything from them now. They are safe. That is what matters." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking between Amara and Kofi, searching for leverage, for a crack, for any sign that his presence could command authority. But he found none. Amara stood tall, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. She had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear. She had raised her children alone, and now in the presence of the man who thought he could undo the past, she was unshakable. "I made mistakes," the man muttered, finally, his voice low, almost defensive. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle the responsibility." Amara's chest tightened at his feeble excuse. "Fear. Your fear cost us everything. My children had to suffer because you could not face responsibility. You left us, and that is the truth you cannot escape." The room fell into tense silence. The children, now fully aware of the tension, clung to their mother, instinctively sensing her anger and resolve. Amara's eyes softened slightly as she knelt down, gathering them close. "You are safe," she whispered to them. "You are loved, and no one will take that away." Kofi's presence reinforced her words. He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering, silently communicating that Amara and her children were protected, supported, and secure. The man exhaled, his defiance faltering as he realized that nothing he could say or do would change the bond Amara had built with her children, nor the life she had fought to protect. Slowly he straightened, a mix of resignation and disbelief crossing his face. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. His footsteps echoed in the hallway, a final reminder of the past he could not reclaim. Amara remained kneeling beside her children, holding them close. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they were not tears of fear or despair. They were tears of release, of catharsis, of triumph over years of hardship and abandonment. Her children's small hands rested on hers, grounding her, reminding her of why she had endured so much and why she would continue to protect, nurture, and love them. Kofi stood beside her, his voice soft. "It's over. You did not fail them. You protected them. You built a life for them, and nothing can take that away. Not him, not anyone." Amara nodded, her breath coming in slow, steadying waves. I think I am finally free," she whispered. "Free from fear, free from the past, and I will keep them safe always." The children, sensing their mother's calm and Kofi's support, relaxed their small bodies, leaning against Amara. The weight of months of uncertainty, anxiety, and danger began to lift, replaced by the warmth of safety, love, and the promise of stability. For the first time in a long while, Amara allowed herself to hope, not recklessly, not blindly, but with cautious optimism. She had faced the man who had abandoned them, confronted the injustice, and emerged unshaken. She had her children, her home, and the support of someone who truly cared. And in that moment she realized that the past, however painful, could not dictate her future. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the polished floors, but the room was filled with a sense of peace. Amara held her children close, feeling their steady heartbeat against hers, and allowed herself to believe that from this point forward life could be different. Safe, nurturing, and filled with the kind of love and trust she had once thought impossible. The sun had begun its descent, casting a warm golden glow across Kofi's home. Inside, the atmosphere was calm, yet charged with the quiet intensity of recent events. The confrontation with the father who had abandoned Amara had passed, leaving behind a residue of triumph, release, and a sense of hard-earned justice. Amara sat with her children close by, their small hands intertwined with hers, their eyes bright and trusting. For the first time in months, the weight of fear and uncertainty seemed to have lifted, replaced by something far more fragile, yet infinitely more powerful: hope. Kofi entered the room quietly, closing the door behind him. He had observed the earlier tension, the emotional confrontation, and now he stood as a pillar of steady support. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. Amara allowed herself a small smile, one that carried relief, exhaustion, and a tentative optimism. I am finally beginning to breathe again," she whispered. "For the first time, I feel that we can really live without constant fear." The children, sensing the calm, moved closer to her, their small bodies radiating a sense of comfort that had been absent for so long. The younger boy clutched a toy he had received earlier in the day, while the older one rested his head lightly against Amara's shoulder. They had witnessed her strength, her courage, and now they were allowed to relax, to be children, and to experience the safety and care they had long been denied. Kofi approached, taking a seat across from them. "Today was important," he said gently. "You faced the past, asserted your strength, and protected your family. That is not easy. But you did it, Amara, and now we can look forward." Amara nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's been a long journey, full of fear, hunger, and despair. And now it feels like we are finally allowed to hope, to trust, to build something new." She glanced at her children, who were now absorbed in playful chatter, and felt her chest tighten with a mixture of pride and tenderness. "For them, I want more than survival. I want happiness, stability, a life they deserve." Kofi's expression softened. "And you will have it. Not all at once, but step by step. Today you've laid the foundation, tomorrow we strengthen it. Every action you take, every decision will build upon what you've already accomplished. Your children will thrive because of your courage and resilience." Amara took a deep breath, absorbing his words. She had been cautious, hesitant to believe in stability or safety, yet the tangible proof of her children's joy, their secure environment, and the gradual progress she had made in her work offered undeniable validation. Slowly, she began to allow herself to envision a future where fear did not dominate, where laughter, learning, and love could flourish. The evening progressed with simple yet meaningful routines. The children were given a warm bath, dressed in fresh clothes, and settled into bed with the soft glow of a nightlight casting gentle shadows across the room. Amara watched them, her heart heavy with gratitude and the weight of the past months, but also buoyed by a fragile joy. For the first time, she could see a path where their lives would not merely be about surviving, but about thriving. Kofi remained nearby, observing quietly. "You've done more than just survive," he said softly. "You've nurtured, protected, and fought for them. And now you've allowed yourself to accept care, guidance, and the tools to create a lasting foundation. That is extraordinary." Amara let out a soft sigh, feeling the tension of the day begin to ease. "I never imagined, after everything, that this day could come, that we could be safe, fed, and free from fear." Her voice trembled slightly, carrying the weight of months of struggle and the relief of finally overcoming them. The children, now asleep, symbolized the tangible result of her perseverance. They were not just surviving, they were thriving in the warmth of stability, care, and safety. Amara realized that the future she had long feared might never exist was now within reach, one small step at a time. Kofi spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "You've built more than just safety. You've built trust, resilience, and hope. That is the greatest gift a parent can give. And now you can allow yourself to rebuild your life alongside them with confidence and dignity." Amara nodded, feeling a rare sense of peace. The constant anxiety, the endless struggle for survival, the fear of abandonment, they all seemed to recede slightly in the presence of safety, love, and the tangible progress she and her children had achieved. She realized that the path forward was not without challenges, but with Kofi's support and her own resilience, it was a path she could navigate with determination and hope. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the chaotic streets where every day was a battle to the moments of small kindness and support to the present, where her children could sleep soundly clothed, fed, and safe. Each step had been earned through courage, patience, and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. Kofi's presence was a constant reassurance, a reminder that support and guidance could coexist with independence and growth. He did not impose, he did not judge, and he allowed Amara to take the lead in decisions concerning her children and her own path forward. This partnership, built on trust and respect, provided a model of stability and care that Amara had longed for but never experienced. As night deepened, the household settled into a quiet rhythm. Amara allowed herself to reflect on the lessons she had learned, that strength is not measured by the ability to endure hardship alone, but by the courage to accept support. That love and care can exist without expectation, and that the past, however painful, does not dictate the future. She had faced abandonment, hunger, and fear, and emerged not broken but resilient, capable, and determined to create a life of stability and hope. The evening air carried a sense of calm, a promise of safety, and the quiet reassurance that the family had weathered the storm and could now begin to build something lasting. Amara felt a profound sense of gratitude and determination. She held her children close, whispered a soft prayer of thanks, and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a long time: peace. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of a safe home, the quiet presence of Kofi, and the gentle breathing of her children, Amara understood the true meaning of resilience, love, and hope. She realized that life, though unpredictable and often harsh, could also offer redemption, second chances, and the opportunity to build a life of dignity and joy. The journey was far from over, but tonight marked a milestone. A family reunited with safety, nurtured by care, and emboldened by the courage to trust, to accept support, and to embrace the possibilities of the future. Amara allowed herself one last glance at her children, now sleeping peacefully, and whispered softly, "We are safe. We are loved, and we will thrive." Life often tests us in ways we never expect, pushing us to the edge of our strength and endurance. Amara's journey teaches us that true resilience is not about facing every challenge alone, but about having the courage to accept help when it is offered, and to trust that support can be genuine. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, a single act of kindness can change the course of a life, not only providing safety and comfort, but restoring hope and dignity. Her story shows that love and care are powerful forces that can heal wounds left by abandonment and hardship, and that the strength of a parent is measured not only by what they endure, but by how they fight for the well-being of those they love. No matter how heavy the past feels, there is always a possibility for a new beginning. Second chances, patience, and trust in the goodness of others can create a foundation for growth, happiness, and stability. Amara's experience reminds us that even small steps, feeding a child, offering protection, believing in someone's potential, can ripple into lasting change, transforming lives and inspiring hope. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on someone you can support or a kindness you can extend today. Share your thoughts in the comments. How did Amara's journey touch you? And if you want to continue hearing stories that inspire hope, courage, and resilience, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see life.